Good afternoon or good morning for those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Christy Ragone, and I am one of the product specialist team leads here at Can-Am Systems. In today's Lunch and Learn, we will take a look at one of my favorite aspects of proven jobs, work orders and budgets. Proven Jobs Work Orders tab allows you to not only import estimates from estimating platforms such as Xactimate and Symbolity's Core Logic, but also allows you the ability to create your own estimates, work orders off the cuff. This also enables you to utilize these work orders to create a budget based off of a margin to keep your job in check, to know where you stand as you are incurring cost. Now, before we get started, as with all of our Lunch and Learns, I just want to touch base on a few housekeeping items. This, of course, is being held in a Zoom format. All of our attendees have automatically been muted during today's session just to cut down on some background noise. We also have automatically turned off your videos just to avoid any distractions and get your undivided attention. This session's recording will be available via our PSA help library, in addition to our company's YouTube channel that I will post in the chat box at the end of this session. Questions can be entered directly into the Zoom Q&A chat box at any time during this session, and I will review those questions at the end of this meeting. If we happen to run out of time and your question has not been addressed during today's session, I will reach out to you directly. Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for attending today's Lunch and Learn, and let's go ahead and get started. Now, before we jump in to learning about work orders and budgets, let's take a quick peek at our agenda for today. The first thing we're going to take a look at is our company settings and user security to effectively utilize work orders, not only for budgeting, but we are also going to dig in to how the same work order can be used throughout the fruition of the claim cycle for budget and capturing cost. Then we are going to take a look at the different ways to budget your job through estimate import, then manual creation, as well as utilizing work orders to create budgets based on cost. Then we are quickly going to review, like I mentioned previously, using the same work order to measure cost incurred. Then finally, what reports and screens can help you and your team quickly and efficiently track spending and manage budgets. And finally, we will close out with any questions you may have. The first thing we're going to talk about today is our user role securities and company settings in Proven Jobs. Let's navigate to Settings, Roles, select the first user role security, select Jobs, and scroll down to Work Orders. Here, you just want to ensure that the proper user role securities have been enabled in order for you to operate the work order screen. So the first work order security we're going to take a look at is the Close Work Order. This just enables the user to close the work order. The Convert Work Order. This just enables the menu options within the work order screen for the convert functionality to operate, such as the convert to voucher summary, to invoice summary, and to the single invoice. Then we have, of course, the create option, which allows you to actually create a work order. The delete option that allows the user to delete the work order. The edit option that allows the user to edit the work order. The recover option, which if a work order was deleted, it allows the user to go into the recover deleted and recover that work order to enable it back on to the job. The reopen option, which allows the user, if the work order has been closed, to reopen the work order. The revision option, which allows the ability to utilize the work order revision functionality, which we'll go over later on in this Lunch and Learn series, to view the work order and to view financials. Now, in order to do work order budgets, you do want to enable all of these options. Now, in order to do the work order budgeting, you definitely want to make sure View Financials is on. The other option we want to take a look at is Job Financials. Here, you want to make sure that View or View Own has been enabled for the job financials. This allows the user to see the financials within the Financials tab of the job file. The next item we're going to take a look at is Company Settings. So navigate to Settings, Company Settings, select Jobs. The first tab we're going to take a look at is the Work Orders tab. Now, Proven Jobs database automatically comes with the traditional work order view, which allows a drop-down view within the work order screen. Some companies do choose to utilize the inline details view, which allows a more detailed view within the work order screen and puts all financials within one condensed view screen. Now I'm just going to go through a couple of these options within this screen. The first one we're going to take a look at is lock work orders for jobs with a completed or closed date. Now, I always do recommend putting this option on. This way, no edits can be made to a job and your revenue stays intact as well as your budget when you have a completed job date on a job file. This other option allows to schedule a locked work order. You will notice on this database that has been turned off. This does not allow users to schedule or modify a locked work order so that edits cannot be made to it. So if a work order has been closed or vouchered, it cannot be scheduled. Now here in the lower section, allow edit to a schedule work order allows the user to come into this work order that has been scheduled and make additional line entries to it. Now I'm just going to enable this option here on my database using revision tracking. We'll review that later on in this Lunch and Learn series. But if you have imported an estimate, it allows you to, number one, take the estimate on import and utilize that as your first work order revision. Then if any updates or modifications have been made from either a manual modification to the work order screen or additional revision updates to the work order screen, you can see those modifications for either, for example, peer review or to notate revisions that have been made on the estimate or work order screen. The next option, Subtrade Assign Only by Work Order Attached. This, if selected, only allows users to create work orders when assigning a subtrade based on the category that has been created on their relationship record. This is particularly helpful when creating budgets and keeping those budgets in line with the Xactimate or Symbility code category selectors that have been defined on the budget created. The next tab we're going to take a look at is our Schedule tab. The item that we want to just take a look at in here is you have the option here to show the work order cost within the Schedule screen. When a work order has been scheduled, you can hover over that scheduled work order and it will show the estimated cost that has been defined on the work order when your budget has been created. And the last tab that we will review today is the Mobile tab. The item that you need to ensure that is selected on here is the Do Not Allow Selector entry prior to category. If you are trying to keep your budget intact throughout the fruition of your job, and your team members are clocking into that job file, and you're not utilizing work orders specifically, in order to maintain your budget, this is another failsafe to ensure that your team members are clocking in to the correct category. If you select Do Not Allow Selector entry prior to category, it allows them to select the appropriate category and selector when clocking in. Now that we have set your user role securities and company settings in place, let's talk about setting your budget from an estimate import. So the first budget that we're going to take a look at is from an estimate import. Now, I've already imported my estimate into this training database, as you can see here. And typically the first thing that we kind of train our clients to do is to automatically change the revenue percent based off of the job type that you expect on this job. Now, this is a fire job here in my testing database. So I'm going to come over here and select the first checkbox to automatically select all of my work orders in this job, and come up to the top, select edit, and change my gross margin percentage. On import, typically it's going to automatically default to a 20% gross margin percent on estimate import unless you modify that in our company settings. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change this to a 40% gross margin and select save. You can see here in the lower left-hand corner of the screen, my overall gross margin on this job type or on this job has been modified to a 40%. And over here on the right-hand side of the screen, because I'm highlighted on a work order here, you see this blue line coming across, that this has also modified based on the work order that I have selected. Now I have basically, in essence, I have imported my Xactimate estimate that I have written of $14,375.27. I know that I cannot exceed an actual cost of $8,625.15 if I want to make a 40% margin. Now, once I have technically created my budget based off of the margin that I want to make on my job file, I can start manipulating my work orders on this job. The next step I'm going to do is I'm going to split out my materials. Again, I'm going to just select that upper work order to reselect all my work orders on this job. And I'm going to select that edit menu option again. And now I'm going to select this option here that says split materials. What it's going to do, you can see here in the bottom section of this screen, it has taken every material out of every work order that is imported from Xactimate. Now, I do have in here items that could be completed by a subtrade. So therefore, I want to keep those in the same work order that it imported in. For example, my drywall, my subtrade is going to complete that task and is going to charge me for that material. I don't want to separate that out into a material work order. But my carpet and my baseboard, etc., I want those split out. My painting, that is going to be completed by my subtrade. So technically, I'm only going to select the items that are going to be maintained as a material work order. So you can either physically select or you can filter out this screen. So because I don't have a ton, I'm just going to check those off. So just my carpet, pad, and my baseboard are items that I'm going to have material purchases for. Everything else are going to be completed by my subtrade. And then over here in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, I'm going to leave it on create. Now, if I wanted to merge it into a work order that has already imported from the Xactimate file, I can merge it into those work orders. Otherwise, I'm just going to leave it on create and I'm going to select save. Now, you can see in the upper section of the screen the work order that is highlighted, 2908 FCC. That has now moved every single work order in my job file into a materials work order. I know it is a materials work order because over here in the bottom right-hand corner of my screen, there is only estimated revenue and estimated cost residing in the material section. So now, just to not get confused, because I have two FCC categories sitting in the screen. Now, if you were working with a very large fire loss, you might have tons of multiple categories as you're starting to manipulate work orders. I'm just going to click on this number option here, and I'm just going to put dash materials. This just lets me know that these are all my materials. Now, you can code this whatever you want, materials bucket, however you want to do it. That just lets me know that this is where I'm going to pull any materials from if I need to make a materials work order. Now, once we have separated out those materials, we can now start scheduling and manipulating these work orders. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start manipulating our work orders. So, for example, I have this FCC, my floor covering carpet, and my detach reset door, my content manipulation, and my cleaning. Now, these final cleanings, I have a living room, foyer, entry, and kitchen. I have the content manipulation inside these rooms. I have some drywall work, and I have my carpet install. And I know that the content manipulation has to be completed by this subtrade. So therefore, I'm going to merge this work order into that FCC work order. I know that subtrade is going to be providing that work for me, and he's going to be charging me for that. So I'm going to take these two work orders, I'm going to select edit, and I'm going to merge. So I'm going to tell the system work order 2901 contents is going to merge into 2904 FCC. So now 2904 FCC has remained intact. If I click on that, it now has the carpet, the pad, and the content manipulation because he's going to be providing all those services for me. In addition, this door detach reset in the foyer and the entryway is also going to be provided by that same subtrade. So I'm going to be manipulating those work orders as well and just merge that into that same work order, so that when that vendor sends me an invoice for the work completed, everything that that vendor is completing is encompassed into that singular work order. Now, this work order for our baseboard, I have on staff a finish carpenter. So he's going to install the baseboard and the living room, foyer, and kitchen at this job site location. So what we're going to do now is we're going to utilize this work order 2905 to assign to an internal laborer. Now, if I want to actually add a line item to this work order, such as providing direction to my employee, or you can simply add it as a note within the body of the existing line entry that's imported from Xactimate. Once you've made edits or modifications to the actual line item entries, we can now schedule this to be utilized in the field. So I'm just going to select the checkbox, select schedule, then select calendar view. I'm using that same work order that imported from my Xactimate estimate. You can see my work order has remained intact. And then I'm just going to select my date and time I want that scheduled. Now you can see when I hover over that work order that I just created for that finished carpentry, that estimated cost that is residing in that work order, $352.03, based on the margin applied, is also visible due to that company setting that I had enabled to show cost on work order. So now let's talk about this from a technician perspective. I'm logged in on my mobile app, and I have gone to the Jobs My Schedule feature, and I'm logged in under the Today section. Here, as a technician, I can see what jobs are scheduled for me today using that same work order that I have imported for my Xactimate estimate and I used for my budget. I have also effectively scheduled it with my technician, and now my technician can simply tap on it to clock in to that job, and you can see here that that work order that I used to create from the estimate import automatically has the associated category and selector from the Xactimate estimate import. I'm simply going to select clock in, which your technician will be clocking in. Once your technician has finished the work at that job site location, has entered in their notes, done their photos, gotten their forms, transferred equipment, etc., they can simply select clock out or change job. That information, of course, will show up in the history of their hours that have been completed at that job site location for them to confirm their hours, and will sync up to the web and create an associated time card. Now you can see here back in the web system, this time card has been created utilizing the same category and selector, again, that I created from my estimate import, from my Xactimate import that has technically carried on throughout the fruition of this job. So now, once these hours from this technician has been approved through our time card approval process, the rate that is existing on this employee's employee record after the time card approval process has been completed will post back to the Financials tab. So you can see this time card has now been transferred, and based off of the rates that I have defined within the internal relationship record, if I navigate back to the job file and to the Financials tab, I can see the cost from that labor clock in are now applied to my job file based on the cost that reside again on my internal labor record of $30, the time that that technician resided in on that job file gives me a total cost incurred. And you can see again that category and selector from that estimate import has also maintained throughout this entire process. Now let's take a look at how that looks on reporting. By navigating to Reports, select List All, and one of my favorite reports, Actual Cost Summary Report, we're going to just select View. And again, we're going to look for that same job we've been working with, the Ray Stark, or that Christy Stark job. Now you can see in this particular report, I have all of my Xactimate code categories kind of broken out here. I'm just going to open this up a little bit bigger for you to see. Now that particular work order, FNC, that's the one we've been using for our clock in and clock out. We created our budget. We're going to kind of scroll over here to our labor. If you will notice, we had an estimated budget based on a 40% margin of $352.03. However, we only actually spent $93 based off of those clock in and clock outs. Now, again, this is just a training database. It probably would take a technician a lot longer to complete those tasks that we have provided. But again, this is our estimated labor amount on that job, our actual clock in and clock outs based off of the labor rate that is residing on that particular technician's internal record. And then this provides you the variance. Now, once you have incurred all the actuals within your job file, you will get your total gross margin on that job. But this is how you can maintain and look at that estimated versus the actual based on this particular code categories within your job file. Now, let's go back over to the totals tab within this job. Now, again, we can see that estimated column. This is our estimated cost within this job based on the margin that we applied. The estimated column breaks this job into our buckets of material, labor, subtrade, equipment, and expenses. Each of these items, as the actual cost are being incurred on the job, those will also flow into each of these respective buckets. Now let's take a look at this labor line here. You can see as this labor line is beginning to grow, as labor costs are continuing to incur on this job site, this difference here in this column will continue to shrink. The next thing we want to discuss is setting your budget from a manual entry. Technically speaking, we don't have to have Xactimate or Symbility to import an estimate in order to create a budget in our system. You can complete this task simply by inputting a manual entry into our system. So in this example, I've created another test job for Annie Winstead, and I am going to go over to my work orders tab. Now, within our system, every job creates a singular work order as a placeholder work order. This intention is to create either a placeholder for estimated revenue until your team member has had the chance to go out and create an estimate on site, or as a work order to send a laborer out to the job site location. In this screen, you can see the blue line indicates my work order number, and in the lower section here, these are my lines pertaining to my work order. I'm just going to click Add and click right below Description to start creating my work order. The blue section here is my estimated revenue, and the yellow section over here on the right-hand side of the screen is my estimated cost based on the margin that I have defined on that job. Now, because I didn't import an Xactimate estimate, it automatically inputs the associated margin based on job type that I have defined in company settings. Now, you as a company most likely have different margins based on specific job types in your company. For example, your mitigation job margin is most definitely different than a repair job margin. So in here, I'm just going to put estimated revenue. And over on the right-hand side of my screen, I have different sections that I can define my budget. If I know that my material budget is going to be $5,000 for this job, and my labor budget is going to be $3,000, and my expenses for dumpsters, permit fees, etc., is going to be about $2,500, I can simply enter those into the different sections of this work order. You can see as I started entering those line entries into this work order, and my margin remained intact, that those estimated costs in the yellow section have automatically modified based on the margin that I want to maintain. Now, this category and selector, again, this can be modified or created by you based on how do you want to maintain your reporting. If you want to create different line entries based on different revenue lines within this job, for example, if this was a demolition line entry based on material, labor, and expenses, and I wanted to add a rebuild line entry, you can do so and enter in those associated amounts within each section. So we have the demolition, we have the rebuild estimated revenue, and that will total up as a total estimated revenue for your job. Now I'm just going to take out this rebuild estimated revenue and keep this demolition in here for this job. So again, we have $5,000, $3,000, and $2,500, which gives us a $10,500 estimated revenue with a $3,150 estimated cost with a 70% margin. So if we hop over here to the Financials tab, you can see that broken out. Again, the exact same information that's residing on that work order tab, but it is sitting here within this Financials tab for you to see as those costs are incurring on the actuals. Now, let's say I wanted to provide my client with this information. As I wrote this estimate out, I can simply click on this selection box beside the work order number, select Print, and select Print Estimate. This will ask me if I want to print an estimate of the work orders. I'm going to select Yes and select Submit to show the client the estimate of that same work order based off that estimated revenue of $10,500. So now let's go back over to that Annie Winstead work order screen. And you can see here I have that budget already set in place on my work order that I have created for the demolition. And I created it off of a category of DMO and a selector of 1. And I've created a materials and labor and expenses budget. And you can see that, of course, back over in my financial screen. If, for example, my internal laborer decided to clock in to that job and not create a work order associated to that job, they can simply go into the mobile app, search for that job, and clock in. Once they have selected clock in, they would need to just select the code associated to that job and the category of the work that they are performing. Once they have completed the tasks at that job site location, they can click clock out. And once that has synced, once those time cards, of course, sync back to the web and have been approved or transferred, you can see that category and selector that was chosen on the mobile application has carried through over. If I go back to my job, select the financials tab, I can see those costs have pulled over from that approval and have also pulled into the totals. Now, if I had also something like materials and I wanted to create those and apply those to the job site, I can actually select those from pre-populated products that have been entered into my database. Let's say I use 25 trash bags at a job site, and I wanted those to flow into that same demo category. You will see that those also populate into that financial screen and also populate into the cost tab. They also flow into the category and selector because I chose that. And then if I go into the totals tab, they actually float into the materials bucket. Now that same report, that actual cost summary report, if I pull that report up for this same loss, Annie Winstead loss, you will see that we have one category in this, a little bit different than an Xactimate import because we created it off the cuff. Our material was $1,500, labor $900, expenses $750. We had no subtrades. And you can see those actuals are pulling in. I'm going to open this up just a touch bigger. Actuals $39.50. That was from those trash bags that we applied to this job site. Labor was from those time card entries. And you can see how those are pulling from those estimated costs that we put in on this job. Now, the last item we want to take a look at is setting your budget based on cost. Our system allows you the ability to enter in the associated cost you're expecting to incur, enter in your associated job type margin, and the system will generate the estimated revenue that you need to bill your customer. So I've cleared out that work order, and let's talk about creating a budget based off cost. So I'm going to create a new work order and add a new line entry. And now I'm just going to put in a placeholder. Now, if you notice here on the right-hand side of my screen, I have an option called Base on Cost. If I select that option, you will notice that cost has automatically modified to orange, and the right-hand side of my screen, my estimated cost, the yellow section, has automatically illuminated. Here, I can enter in the associated cost that I'm going to incur or I expect to incur on this job because maybe I don't know how much I should charge my client. So I'm going to put $500 for material, let's say $1,500 for labor, and maybe I'm going to have $150 in overhead expenses. So now I'm going to apply my margin of a 40% margin, and you will notice that my estimated revenue section has automatically modified based off of this margin applied. Now, if I continue modifying that margin, this estimated revenue will modify based off of that margin. Now that is because I've entered in that cost. It is automatically adjusting. The last and final item I want to just quickly discuss is our revision tracking tool. Within Proven Jobs, we have the ability to track revisions made within the work orders screen. Let's go back to our original job file from our Xactimate import. You can see I have a revision option located in the upper banner of my work order screen. Here I have two options: Save Work Order Modifications as a Revision and View Revisions. Let's take a look at both options. If I select View Revisions, here you can see every revision or modifications from estimate imports or updates that I have done to this job file. You can see the associated Xactimate ID and update based on the associated import and import date. If I choose to select this specific estimate and compare it to another estimate or modification, the system will show me what has been modified or changed. There was a modification of a total revision difference of $2,395.84. If you are looking to see, for example, if your estimator wrote a good estimator on initial site inspection, comparative to when you did a peer review, you could see the modification in the estimate revision difference. Additionally, if your adjuster modified an estimate, you could also see the revision difference. If I made a modification to an estimate and changed the revenue, we're just going to do this as an example, I could also select Save Work Order Modifications as a Revision, then select View Revisions, and the system would automatically show me that modification in the revision screen. You will also see that I don't have an estimate ID associated with it because I did that from the actual work order screen. If I had imported or updated an estimate, that estimate ID would be visible. Again, we want to thank each and every one of you for attending today's Work Orders and Budgets Lunch and Learn. We will now open the floor for questions.